Good afternoon. I'm doing a presentation on schizophrenia, a psychotic disorder. I'm Vanessa Guidry. I'm in Advanced Abnormal Psychology from LaTourneau University. What is schizophrenia? Schizophrenia is a disorder in which personal, social, and occupational functioning deteriorate as a result of disturbed thought process, distorted perceptions, unusual emotions, and motor abnormalities. Approximately 1% of the world's population suffers from this disorder. It is a psychotic disorder that has a devastating effect on the lives of the person affected and on the family member. It may involve characteristic disturbances in thinking, such as delusions, in perception, such as hallucinations, speech, emotions, and behavior. Schizophrenia typically appears in late adolescence or early adulthood and tends to advance through three phases. Continuation of schizophrenia, the predominant phase. Symptoms are not yet obvious, but the person is beginning to deteriorate. He or she may withdraw socially, speak in vague or odd ways, develop strange ideas, or express little emotion. Active phase. Symptoms become apparent. Sometimes this phase is triggered by stress or trauma in the person's life. For example, a middle-aged woman could be triggered by the loss of her cherished dog. The residual phase. Returning to a predominant-like level of functioning, they may retain some negative symptoms, such as blunted emotion, but have a lessening of the striking symptoms of the active phase. Although 25% or more patients recover completely from schizophrenia, the majority continue to have at least some residual problems for the rest of their lives. The history of schizophrenia. The term schizophrenia was coined in 1910 by the Swiss psychiatrist Paul Eugen Bleuler, derived from the Greek word schizo, which means split, and phren, mind, so basically a split mind. Bleuler had intended the term to refer to the dissociation of loosening of thoughts and feelings that he had found to be a prominent feature of illness. The term schizophrenia has led to much confusion about the nature of the illness, but Bleuler had intended it to replace the older, even more misleading term of dementia praecox, which means dementia of early life. This older term had been championed by the eminent German psychiatrist Emil Kraepelin, who mistakenly believed that the illness only occurred in young people and that it inevitably led to mental deterioration. Bleuler disagreed on both counts and in an attempt to clarify matters changed the name of the illness to schizophrenia. Bleuler believed that, contrary to mental deterioration, schizophrenia led to a heightened consciousness of memories and experiences. So, the DSM-5 criteria for schizophrenia. For 1 month, individual displays 2 or more of the following symptoms much of the time: delusions, hallucinations, disorganized speech, very abnormal motor activity, including catatonia, and negative symptoms. At least one of the individual symptoms must be delusions, hallucinations, or disorganized speech. Individual functions much more poorly in various life spheres than was the case prior to the symptoms. Beyond this 1 month of intense symptomology, individual continues to display some degrees of impaired functioning for at least 5 additional months. Many researchers believe that in order to help predict the course of schizophrenia, there should be a distinction between type 1 and type 2 schizophrenia. People with type 1 schizophrenia are thought to be dominated by positive symptoms, such as delusions, hallucinations, and certain forms of thought disorders. Those with type 2 schizophrenia have more negative symptoms, such as restricted affect, poverty of speech, and loss of volition. Type 1 patients generally seem to have been better adjusted prior to the disorder, to have later onset of symptoms, and to be more likely to show improvement, especially when treated with medications. The positive symptoms of type 1 schizophrenia may be linked more closely to biochemical abnormalities in the brain, while the negative symptoms of type 2 schizophrenia may be tied largely to structural abnormalities of the brain. There are a number of schizophrenia-like disorders listed in DSM-5, each distinguished by particular durations and sets of symptoms as described in the Schizophrenia Spectrum Disorders and Array of Psychosis table. Schizophrenia Spectrum Disorders and Array of Psychosis. In this table, it names the disorder, the key features, duration, and lifetime prevalence. For example, schizophrenia. Various psychotic symptoms such as delusions, hallucinations, disorganized speech, restricted or inappropriate affect, and catatonia. Duration 6 months or more. Lifetime prevalence 1%. The other disorder, brief psychotic disorder. Various psychotic symptoms such as delusions, hallucinations, disorganized speech, restricted or inappropriate affect, and catatonia. Duration less than 1 month. Lifetime prevalence unknown. And then you have schizophreniform disorder, rather. Key features, various psychotic symptoms such as delusions, hallucinations, disorganized speech, restricted or inappropriate affect, and catatonia. Duration 1 to 6 months, 0.20%. And then you have the rest of the disorders such as schizoaffective disorder, delusional disorder, psychotic disorder due to another medical condition, substance medication-induced psychotic disorder, and so forth. What are the symptoms of schizophrenia? Positive symptoms, which is known as type 1, excess of thought, emotion, and behavior. You have delusion, which is a belief that will be seen by most members of society as misrepresentation of reality, is called disorder of thought, content, or delusion. You have delusion of grandeur, a mistaken belief that the person is famous or powerful. Delusion of persecution, a common delusion of people when they feel people are out to get them. You have thought disorder, hallucinations, a psychotic symptom of perceptual disturbance in which something is seen, heard, or otherwise sensed, although it is not actually present. You have auditory hallucination, the most common form experienced by people with schizophrenia. Finally, disorganized speech, pathological excesses as in loose associations, neologisms, preservation, and claim. One last positive symptoms, inappropriate affect. This means displays of emotions that are unsuited to situation, a symptom of schizophrenia. Individuals may smile when making a somber statement or upon being told terrible news, or they may become upset in situations that should make them happy. And they also have inappropriate shifts in mood. There are also negative symptoms of schizophrenia, basically type 2, which are deficits of thought, emotion, and behavior. Some of these negative symptoms are avolition, which is the inability to initiate and persist in activities. People with this symptom, known as apathy, show little interest performing even in the most day-to-day functions, including those with personal hygiene. The next one is deficiency of speech. The individual responds to questions with brief replies and may appear uninterested in the conversation. Affective flattening, and apparently emotionless demeanor, including toneless speech and vacant glaze when reaction would be expected. The next one, restricted affect, and indifference to activities would typically be considered pleasurable, including eating, social interactions, and sexual relations. And then the next symptom, negative symptom, social withdrawal. There also are psychomotor symptoms, which are unusual movements or gestures. Psychomotor symptoms is catatonia in extreme form. People in a catatonic stop responding to their environment, remain motionless and silent for long stretches of time. People with catatonic rigidity maintain in a rigid, upright posture for hours and resist effects to be moved. Others exhibit catatonic posturing, assuming awkward, bizarre positions for long periods of time. They may, for example, spend hours holding their arms out at a 90-degree angle or balancing in squatting position. Okay, so case scenario of Larry. Larry is a homeless man who lives on the streets of New York City's Upper West Side, suffered from a combination of schizophrenia and cocaine and alcohol use disorder. He was a mentally ill chemical abuser, known as MICAs for short. MICAs are known as dual diagnosis patients, who are people who display both a severe mental disorder and a substance use disorder. He displayed the combined effects of schizophrenia and substance abuse. As long as he did not abuse these substances, his schizophrenic disorder was responsive to treatment. But Larry was unable to resist cocaine and alcohol, and the substances combined with his schizophrenia produced a pattern of severe psychosis. While on the streets, Larry behaved bizarrely. He would roam the streets in a menacing way, scream at passers-by, attack and threaten those who crossed his path. He heard voices telling him to commit crimes against property, and oftentimes he would sit under the corner of a bridge spaced out. He went from one day being a volatile person to the next day laughing and having conversations with himself. Larry was arrested more than 30 times and imprisoned at least 6 terms. In prison with substances out of reach, he would quickly calm down, become more coherent, and seem ready for treatment in the community. However, once back in the streets, he would seek alcohol and cocaine instead of treatment, and the whole pattern would begin again. Continuation of Larry. The relationship between substance abuse and mental dysfunctioning is complex. A person's mental disorder may precede his or her substance abuse, and he or she may take a drug as a form of self-medication or as a result of impaired judgment. Substance abuse may cause or exacerbate psychopathology. Cocaine and amphetamines can exacerbate the symptoms of psychosis and can quickly intensify the symptoms of schizophrenia, as in Larry's case. Substance abuse and mental disorders interact to create a complex and distinct problem that is greater than the sum of its parts. The course and outcome of each disorder can be significantly influenced by the other. One of the major concerns and problems is, as a therapist, with the situation of Larry, he can go unrecognized. Well, his diagnosis can go unrecognized substance abuse and may lead to a misdiagnosis and misunderstanding of his disorders because of the fact he have a substance abuse problem and because of the fact he has schizophrenia. The treatment of MICAs is further complicated by the fact that many treatment facilities are designed and funded to treat either mental disorders or substance abuse. Only some are equipped or willing to treat both. As a result, it is not uncommon for MICA patients to be rejected as inappropriate for treatment in both substance abuse and mental health programs. Patients such as Larry may fall through the cracks in this way and find himself in jail or in a homeless shelter, which is unfortunately. Therapists must provide treatment programs committed to building trust and provide intensive case management tailored to Larry's needs, people such as Larry, which is a unique combination of problems rather than expecting Larry to adapt to traditional forms of care. Larry would need to be committed to a mental health facility for treatment of his dual diagnosis problem. The Christian worldview. The fall affects the cause of schizophrenia because when Adam and Eve assumed against God, they became separated of God. Sin has an essence of distrust. The essence of death is separation. Man experienced death with his relationship with God when he became separated of God. Sin affected several levels of dimensions. It affected the vertical dimension between Adam and Eve and God. Sin affected the social dimension of Adam and Eve because they died with the relationship they had with each other. Adam and Eve experienced death in a cosmic dimension because their sin affected the world. Finally, sin affected the horizontal dimension between Adam and Eve and man. Before the fall, Adam and Eve was transparent with themselves. Since the fall of Adam and Eve, every being was born with a sinful nature. Sin impacted man in every facet of his being, in his mind, his emotions, in the ability to reason, and his volition. His will impacted his body. Due to the fall, man became separated from God. So as descendants of Adam, we all enter the world separated from God and by nature children of wrath. We endured physical death as descendants from Adam, which Cain killed Abel, which was the first human death, impacting man for generations down the line. The clothes we wear signifies a fallen world because nakedness brings about shame. God had to kill animals to make clothes for Adam and Eve, which symbolizes that our salvation does not come through us, our own works, but by God's grace, when He clothes us in His righteousness. Overall, because man was disobedient to God, death and suffering entered into the world. It's through suffering, death, and resurrection of His Son that we can gain salvation, so that we are no longer condemned to live forever in a fallen. In conclusion, in the Christian worldview, they may feel that individuals have schizophrenia is because of their sins. I mean, when you think back to it, look at the fall of Adam and Eve, and because of their sin, generations down the line have been, punished. Anyhow, many may feel that healing should be sought from God by confessing their sins to Him instead of being dependent on drugs and seeking psychiatric counsel. The Bible provides several cases where Jesus healed the sick and paralytic by forgiving their sins. The woman who was hemorrhaging for 12 years was healed when she touched Jesus' robe because her faith healed her. Finally, these are the references I used to help me with this presentation. Thank you. That concludes the presentation.